What is happening, people? Welcome to this opposition preview because this weekend it is Tottenham against Sunderland at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. High-flying Sunderland. They're doing fantastic on their return to the Premier League, which is great to see. And this should be a good one. For those listening on YouTube, thank you. Please do like and subscribe. Also, big up to those listening via podcast platforms. That's via your audio form. Please drop us a follow and a 5-star review. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Alex from a big Sunderland podcast. Alex, firstly, how are you doing? Happy New Year to you, and talk to people a little bit about you and the podcast.
Happy New Year, gents. It's been a brilliant new year and a brilliant 2025 so far for Sunderland. What the full podcast is, a podcast that was kind of born in some of the worst times of being a Sunderland fan, to be honest with you. I'm a slightly newer member of the team, but I was a historic listener of the podcast, even when we were playing Cheltenham and Rochdale and all of those guys. So, I wouldn't classify myself as a glory supporter, but I've joined the podcast when things were a little bit better for us. So, riding the back of a bit of a unique season so far. So, can't complain.
No worries, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Good story there. Thank you, Alex, as well, for your time. This should be a good one, and it's a big game this weekend. Let's get into it then. I want to talk, if you don't mind, a little bit about you as a Sunderland fan. You've touched on it already there. What does Sunderland mean to you, if I were to ask you that question?
Well, I have a bit of a unique Sunderland story, really. So my entire family are Sunderland, born and bred. It's where my sort of bloodline goes, if you want to call it. But I'm actually somebody who's grown up and lived in Newcastle. So having basically a 25, 27-year stint of supporting one of the worst teams to support in the league, we didn't have a particularly brilliant, period of time for whether it was ownership, players, disconnect with the fans. And now, actually, I'm walking around the streets of Newcastle with my chest puffed out, proud. We've actually got a team who represent the city, hardworking, a bit of talent, a bit of grit. We know how to sort of do a bit of that housery, as everyone's talking about at the moment, which definitely gets the crowd up. I think my main take from this season is, yes, we're a quality team. Yes, we've got a little bit in the tank as far as, I guess, quality and magic. But I think the connection between the pitch and the stands is the biggest it's ever been. And as somebody who has always been, desperate to have a connection with a team and be proud, the last 12 months, but more specifically the last 6 months have probably been the best of my Sunderland support in life. And I would probably vouch that most Sunderland fans would say the same. From the beginning of the playoffs to this moment right now, you're going to do well to find, a more interesting or a period of time with better moments. There's been a highlight reel of huge goals and great games.
Alex, thank you for sharing that, your own story as well there. I do appreciate that, but it's definitely fair to say you are flying at the moment. And to be honest with you, some things you say there about the togetherness between the stands and the players, that grit about the team, the passion, all these things. And I'm just thinking at Tottenham, that's probably what's missing. That's interesting that you highlight that, and do appreciate you doing that. But I want to review your season so far before we get into the game. So what have you made of it so far? I mean, I think I know the answer. I'm going to ask anyway. I assume you're delighted. I mean, let's be honest with you. You're probably already safe. You're above Newcastle. You're in the top 7. What have you made of it?
Yeah, I mean, if I was a betting man, I don't think you could have foreseen this in a million years. Look at some of the original predictions for the Premier League. Your Rio Ferdinands, the sort of the TNT sports commentators. They had us at 20th. They had us, people recommended a record low points total. So somewhat smug to say that we're 7th in the league on 29 points. It's incredible. And, I think most Sunderland fans might say this, there's a bit of a saying, which is doing a Sunderland. Normally, if you have a good period of time, you're always waiting for it to somehow unravel and something go wrong. Clearly, we're not riding a wave of momentum. It's clearly a well thought out tactical operation, and maybe tying it back to what you've just described there. You might even compare this to West Ham this season as well. But it's clearly a top-down operation where everything is operating like a well-oiled machine. I always find that it's frequently the clubs who are in the relegation battle where the fans aren't liking the owners, maybe the leadership hasn't been consistent for a number of years. What we can say categorically is that the fans are absolutely overjoyed with the owner. We've had the same director of football in for the last 5 years, Christian Speakman, who's doing an unbelievable job. And then in the last year or so, we've added Florent Casolfi, the former Roma sporting director, to kind of allow us that access into the Belgian markets, the French markets that we've tapped into really nicely. And we just seem like such a smooth operator, which, as far as the last 30 years go, we've just never had something comparable. It's unbelievable.
It's honestly good to see. Alex, thank you very much for that. I mean, this might be difficult because everyone, well, from an outside point of view, is impressed, I think. But would you say as a standout individuals, Granit Xhaka, for example, comes to my head, of course, being across the road from Spurs in London rivals, but I think he's been really good. But anyone else maybe that has really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think what will always naturally happen is the players who've had the biggest careers and are the biggest names will, the Sky Sports reporters, they'll naturally gravitate to these people because, more people are interested in them. It's an easier person to potentially summarize, there's more highlights of them, all that kind of thing. But some of the underlying or the unsung heroes of this particular season have been Reynaldo at left back from Atletico Madrid. We've signed him on a free. He's probably the best left back we've ever had at the club, and that's not just me sort of over egging him. He's been unbelievable, and some of the one-on-one battles that he's won, in particular versus Pedro Neto again at Stamford Bridge, he completely marked him out of the game. So much so that they swapped wings and they brought Estevao onto the right-hand side. And Estevao, I didn't even know he was on the pitch for the first 7 or 8 minutes. Honestly, he was completely man-marked. And I think, in addition to him, the other one that I can imagine a lot of Sunderland fans will want me to mention is Noah Siddiqui. I think he's getting a bit more recognition, but just because he's playing next to Xhaka, everybody's looking at Xhaka, and obviously he's got a few more assists than Siddiqui does. But the ground that lad covers is incredible. The way he turns over the ball, how smoothly and quickly he can actually basically regenerate the play and turn it in our favour. I mean, he's a small, athletic lad from, a sort of an African background. The Kante comparison is a maybe an obvious one, but he genuinely does represent that kind of player. And, if we were thinking about sellable assets to do the kind of Brentford approach where you regenerate the team for the next season, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he was sold for 50 or 60 million. He's only 20 years of age. In today's market, I don't think that's a crazy shout. He's been probably our star of the season, over then maybe Xhaka.
Okay, thank you very much. It's good to hear, of course, other names you say there that maybe aren't recognised as much. Alex, what have you made of Spurs this season, and Thomas Frank in particular? Do you think he needs time because he's coming under a little bit of pressure? Before we recorded this, Tottenham played Brentford. It was a 0-0 draw, and Frank was booed by some Spurs fans in the away end.
I feel bad for him, to be honest with you. I think he's unfortunately now maybe third or fourth in a row of underwhelming managerial appointments for you guys. And I think he's potentially fallen victim to there's probably a growing frustration among Spurs fans. And let's say Frank had came in and you had a manager for the last 5 years who'd been fairly consistent, you'd probably have a little bit more time or maybe a little bit more patience. I feel like you've got thin patience as a fan base, which maybe is understandable, to be fair, because, I would probably be the same if my rivals were potentially about to win the league and I didn't particularly agree with our investment. I would want better leadership and I'd want quicker results. On the flip side, though, your injury record is insanely bad. We've obviously got maybe a comparable scenario in the fact that we've got all the AFCON players out of the squad at the moment, but to have Kulusevski out, Maddison out, Bergvall's out at the moment, isn't he? Basuma's out, I believe, as well. They're full-on starter players for you guys. They're not squad players like maybe some of the AFCON players are for us. If we lost two of our set, let's say we lost Siddiqui and Xhaka, let's say we lost our forward players and potentially a striker as well. I actually do think we would be completely buggered. Pardon my French. So I do think there's a degree of patience needed, and I think he's got a unique scenario, which probably will buy him a bit of time. I imagine, if I was the owners, of Spurs, he hasn't got the sort of the full picture to work with there. So I would bide my time. I also do worry though with those sorts of managers who've been mid-level Premier League team managers, going from having lower expectations and maybe having to, take the scalp of bigger teams to being the team who was on the ball for more time, has more possession. Sometimes it's a bit of a risky one if the manager can actually make that step up. And, some managers are just brilliant at being, giant killers and brilliant mid-table managers who can potentially get their team up to a European finish here or there. Maybe is Frank tactically astute enough to be, an elite coach who manages in the Champions League? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are from what you've seen so far.
Firstly, thank you. I think you've been really honest as well about, different things there, injury situation, and also with your own club. So I appreciate you coming on and being, level-headed, really, sensible. I think for me, I'm behind Thomas Frank, but I look at last night in particular and I go, I can understand maybe more of the frustrations than I could before. I used to think, right, why are we judging a manager after 4 or 5 months? I am still behind him, but I look at that and go, we've gone into the game happy with the draw, and Brentford are a good side. I'm not one of those who goes, oh, you should be turning over this team, turning over that. I'm not one of them, right? Brentford are a good side. They're very good in particular at home. And I don't think the draw is disastrous, but when you find yourself in the bottom half, I think we should personally, if we want to go there and shut up shop, which we did, that's fine. But we've got to, for me, have a plan of like, okay, we're going to utilize set pieces or we're going to utilize the counter attack. But we just weren't interested. Any opportunity to go forward, we weren't really, aiming to do that at all. It was a really even and balanced game. And you're thinking Brentford are a good side, but the aim should be to finish above them. I think that'd be fairly, sensible. You'd hope to say. Again, I'm not one of those who goes, Frank's got to get top 4, but I think if he, for me, should be getting us in that kind of top 8, hopefully competing in and around there. Again, I think that's realistic. You make some good points. I actually think Frank is a good in-game manager. I think he's flexible and has a lot of characteristics, like he's likable and just that whole thing about that he can adapt and will adapt each game. I think that goes in his favour, as well as you said, those players coming back from injury. For me, the main problem comes from upstairs. You mentioned that kind of top down. I think it's the same at Spurs. We've seen with West Ham as well. That's why I think, it is a similar situation where, like, for example, we let Son go and we sold him. Probably the right thing to do. But we had 3 left wingers leave the club in the summer. One whose loan terminated, one we sent out on loan, and one who we sold in Son. In the end, it was I think it was Solomon, Werner, and Son. We signed no left wingers, for example, and things like that. I just look at it and go, hang on a minute. We had 4 left wingers as it was. Yes, too much, but now we've got 1. So some things like that, I just question the thinking behind. And we knew about these injuries. I'm like, sign a replacement, and we just put all our eggs in one basket for these players, and then we offer them less money and a lower bid, and we wonder why we don't end up with them. I often say we shop in Temu and expect Harrods. That's what the way I put it. And I think it's so true though. That's the thing. And then us fans are expecting kind of up sky high again. Harrods plus really is what fans expect. So I just think we should give Frank time, but at the same time, he's got to be doing better.
Well, we don't have Harrods up in the northeast, so I'm not quite sure what you're on about there. But no, I also think as well what ends up becoming a problem from that is let's say it doesn't go well for Frank and he does end up getting the sack for argument's sake, or even he resigns or something along those lines. For the next manager who's contemplating whether or not he joins Tottenham or not, if he's got the option of a Spurs or, I don't know, some of a European club it may be, or a Premier League club who've got a good director of football and they sign well. I mean, from my personal perspective, if I was making a career move, I'd pick the club where I know I'm going to have the players, astute signings. In the long run, it may actually put off, I guess, people from potentially joining Spurs, because you need to believe in the mission and you need to believe in the people who are above you. I think I was saying to my dad on the way back last night, it sounds ridiculous, but there's been 2 games that Sunderland have played this season against, obviously, Arsenal and Man City, and 2 of them have been prime time Sky Sports games. It was I feel like that Saturday night game when we drew 2-2, everybody saw us against Arsenal and how good we were. And then yesterday, everybody was off work and they saw the Man City game. And those sorts of, games where you are projecting out to the world and saying, look, like, we're not just some team who are riding a bit of momentum, like watch us against the best teams, we're good. I'm so confident going into this January window now that certain players will think, oh, you know what, actually Sunderland are good and the atmosphere is great and there's nearly 50,000 people in the stadium and I could be going elsewhere, but it wouldn't be the same. And I think we'll attract better players. That actually did happen in the summer. Interestingly, Mukiele and Getrauda, who we got from Leipzig as well, they both, and actually Brian Brobby also said that they'd been approached earlier in the summer and it basically said, I'll put that on ice for the time being because there's quite a lot of risk. Then they actually were very open and said, Getrauda signed on deadline day, Brobby signed 2 days before the transfer window ended, and Mukiele was a week before. He actually missed the West Ham game. He wasn't playing for us then. And they all said that when they saw the 3-0 win against West Ham and they'd seen Xhaka and they'd seen the atmosphere, they then bit the bullet and came and signed for us, which is quite an interesting thing for people to say that they'd actually rejected somebody but came back. And, for the same thing with Spurs, you don't want that kind of bad shadow over the club for too long, because ultimately it will put you at an unfortunate disadvantage in the market. So I don't know what you would suggest. Do you think you're better off biting the bullet and getting somebody else in, or surely you've got to persist because you've had, what's it now, 3 or 4 managers in the last 4 or 5 years now?
Exactly, too many, really. And we go through managers that you wouldn't believe. And I just think you're right. It's the poor managerial decisions. Like, we got to Champions League final in 2019, and then you sacked Mauricio Pochettino, within 5-6 months after. When he asked for a rebuild, we signed nobody, in the summer. Well, we say nobody. We did sign players, but it wasn't what we were looking for. It was completely wrong. We got the recruitment wrong and overpaid. And it was just a disaster, basically. But anyway, even if you sign players, know it takes time to gel. And we weren't great, right? And we were kind of mid-table where we sat when he went, but the players were just shot. They were just so tired because it was the same group of players that got to the Champions League final. Of course, a lot of games, like everyone else, put a lot into it, and for us, that was a big achievement. Then they went, of course, played, I think it was in the World Cup, and like Kieran Trippier just had no break, every game for Tottenham, every game for England, and come back and he just wasn't 100%. And I think, the decision was made too quickly. We got greedy. We're like, oh, hang on. That's what the club do upstairs. They look at that. We get to Champions League final. Same happened with Bilbao, I think, with Ange, that they see that and think, oh, we want more of that. And then when things don't work out straight away after, it's boom, go. Come on, we've got to do better than that. And with the whole Ange thing as well, to do it so soon after Bilbao and so soon after the final, it kind of crushed a feeling going into the new season. Not necessarily because he was gone. That was one thing, but to know not who was going to come in and what direction the club was going to take. And there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, was unnecessary maybe from the club. But at the same time, Ange wasn't sustainable. So no, you're right. I think we've got to stick with Frank, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and go he's the right man for Tottenham, because although deep down I do think he probably is. I do see things like yesterday that do concern me a bit, but I think he should have at least a season minimum to prove, and that doesn't really include Kulusevski and Maddison coming back, because they're meant to come back at the end of the year. For me, he needs more than just that single transfer window, because we're still trying to find the best 11. That's a bit of a concern, and we need to, of course, do better. I know that, but I think it's too early to make a decision.
No, I agree. And I sometimes scratch my head at certain owners and I think, you have all the data in the world these days and you have all of the case studies imaginable of other well-run clubs. What do? What decisions do they make? What do they base their decisions off? There's no excuse to really be quite as I don't know, I suppose pathetic in a business sense, really, to actually make so many frequent decisions. And even then, you take Spurs as like an example. You went from like Mourinho to Conte to Nuno to, Ange to whatever in I don't know, what's that, 5 years or so? Surely after the 3rd or 4th managerial appointment doesn't work out after a year, somebody at the top says, do you know what, maybe we are too trigger happy. Let's give one person the opportunity to have 2, 3, 4 years. And, at the end of the day, if you persisted with Nuno, for example, or you persisted with Conte, who knows, you'd probably still be about where you are now anyway. So, surely the downside, you're not going to get relegated. That you may as well try a different strategy. That's what I scratch my head with. It's like, with Chelsea, I suppose that, and you probably wouldn't thank me for the comparison, given that, the rivalries, but at least some of their managers have brought in silverware, and they might be able to argue that, bringing in a Tuchel for 2 years and then bringing in Maresca for 1 year, it served a purpose in the short run. Surely, I think Spurs now have to be thinking, right, how can we do actually, this sounds ridiculous, but a Sunderland-like long-term strategy of building up the club. And I mean, I never thought in a million years that I'd be saying Spurs should take advice from Sunderland, but that sounds a bit crazy to say. But, for all intents and purposes, on a much bigger scale with way bigger money and better fan base and all that kind of thing, an operation like Sunderland's could pay dividends for you guys in the long run. I'm not saying you necessarily win the league, but surely you become more so like you were under Pochettino. You could see it happening.
And Frank has similar characteristics there to Pochettino, and I just think Frank's the guy to unite the dressing room, A, but B, in particular, unite the fans with the kind of players. I think that's so important, and I know it's difficult. Money's a big part of the game, and I think generally there is a divide with whether it be season ticket prices, or I think generally there's that growing divide anyway between players and fans. But at Spurs, it's just getting bigger and bigger, and it's just not nice. It's the kind of cracks that are starting to emerge. But Alex, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I appreciate that as well. And do you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head with everything as well. It's interesting to know that it also reaches non-Spurs fans as well about the problems at the club. If that's all right, I have a couple of questions before we get to the game. And one of them is, what one Spurs player would you take as Sunderland and why? It's probably difficult after the way the Spurs are playing this season. But doesn't mean they have to fit in the 11, by the way. We'll make it a little bit easier. One Spurs player you take, even if you go, okay, I think they can have an impact off the bench. You don't have to fit into your 11 necessarily.
Yeah. So I will preface this by saying Sunderland have had a good 6 months, and some of Spurs' players have been basically at the peak of football for about 5-10 years. So in our team, because our defence is so good, I wouldn't take any Spurs' defenders. That's not saying that Van der Ven and Romero aren't as good as our centre-halves, because they're much better. But I would probably, if everybody was fit, I think I would probably go with Kulusevski, and that's probably the one thing that we lack. And it is a tactical thing on our side. We set out to be hard to beat rather than creative. Now, what we need is really a forward player who can score. Now, when Kulusevski is fit and he's firing, he could get you potentially 10 goals a season, and he creates, and he's got that eye for goal. We need that in abundance, to be honest with you. So I'd probably pick him just off of the fact that we need creativity. And I think he's a great bloke. I watch a few of his interviews as well. He's so cool. He's he's the kind of like high pressure player you'd want in your team, definitely.
I love that pick, Alex. Thank you. A lot of people just go for the bigger names, Romero, Van der Ven. I like that because you're defending well. Was it third best defence so far in the Premier League season, Sunderland, if I'm not mistaken? And that's incredible.
It's crazy. And looking at the league at the moment, I think there's about 2 or 3 teams who've lost less games than us. We've only lost 4 games all season, which is crazy, really. And yeah, I mean, I would have assumed we'd have down for at least 10, 15 losses across the season. But we just, every game you think we lose, we end up drawing. It's good. And then that's an extra 6 or 7 points over the course of the season. So I'll take that.
Love it. Do you have a favourite memory, Spurs and Sunderland?
Easy. I'm sure, if you were to ask any Sunderland fan this game would spring to mind. But do you remember when I think the game ended up being potentially either 4-1 or 4-2 at the Stadium of Light? Darren Bent scored, but he scored a brace. He also missed 2 penalties. And then Zenden scored a sort of side volley overhead kick thing into the top corner. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also remember, I think Peter Crouch scored for you guys as well. But I must have been, when was that, under Bruce? I must have been about 12 or 13 at the time. And that was like a proper Barclays game. All the faces who were playing, it was Defoe and Crouch up front for you guys. I think you had maybe Cranky or Modric playing at the time. That was when we had like Darren Bent, Steve Malbronk, Zenden obviously playing, basically forget the defenders. We'll just all try and score 1 million goals and see who wins at the end. That was probably my favourite. Only other one special mention was when Gabriel Cisse scored in maybe the last 5 minutes at White Hart Lane. That was also a very good one. But to be honest with you, I can't think of too many games where we've won at White Hart Lane. I think the last 7 or 8 years whilst you were there, maybe even 5 years, you pretty much battered us every time. So it's slim pickings.
Might change this year, though, to be fair, the way we're playing. Honestly, I do think that. Thank you very much. On the game then, I mean, I get the feeling around Sunderland at the moment between the fans and just the camp in general is really positive. Don't blame you inside the top 7. And to be honest with you, you're probably looking forward rather than back. And that's the real exciting thing for Sunderland fans. But how do you feel in particular about this game? Do you think you can win it?
Well, it's interesting at the moment. It seems like you actually would rather play Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium rather than away. So it's probably the one time where I'm more, encouraged to be not playing at the Stadium of Light, which is strange given we're undefeated there. But I would say there's no part of me that genuinely believes that we will go and win. We may win, but to go in and say I'm confident that we'll beat you guys is crazy. I don't know if that's the PTSD in me over 30 years of supporting Sunderland, but man for man, you're still a team that is arguably better than ours. So I give you your respect there. I think if we defend as well as we have done against Man City last night, for example, we could nick something. You do have lapses in concentration at the back, Spurs. I think especially at home, you do concede. So there's hope in me that we could maybe keep it 0-0 for long periods of the game and potentially nick one at the end. But I do see you scoring. So I'd probably say maybe a 1-1 would be if I had to predict what I'd be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Who should Tottenham be watching out for in the Sunderland team? Who can cause us the most problems?
Good question. So I actually think Brian Broby, our striker, is coming into his own really encouragingly. I mean, he has a couple goals already, but his match fitness wasn't there at the start of the season. He'd been at Ajax, but he hadn't really had a pre-season. We signed him, and Isidore was scoring at the time. So for the first 2.5 months of the season, he hadn't played really any matches, and it was kind of clear to see his pace and strength wasn't quite what you wanted. And then the last month or so, he's started pretty much every game. And his physicality and the way that he gets in front of the man and pins the man and then spins off them is super encouraging. And I think if he was to get 1 goal, he'd get 2 and he'd get 3. And, I think on the break, what you need to worry about is us breaking. I think we'll sit in and we'll let you come at us and hope that you don't score, similarly to what we do with a lot of teams. But if somebody is going to score, it's potentially him. So I'd definitely keep an eye out on Brian Broby.
Okay, thank you very much. And you gave your score prediction there, didn't you? I believe. Did you say 1-1?
Oh well, no, I could see it being 1-1. That's a good question.
You can be honest, it's fine. I won't be offended. If you think deep down, I think Sunderland will win this game.
No,
no shame in it.
No, I don't. Spurs games are always high scoring and it is always open, but Frank isn't that manager and you don't have as many of those games anymore. Do you know what? No, I'll stick with 1-1. I think we will score first and then you'll basically put us under the cosh for the last 20 and we might concede. We're not as good as away from home, so I think we'll probably concede 1, but I think we'll score.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And I mean, your home form is the one that is really impressive. Unbeaten, of course, there, and I don't see that changing at all, really, if I wanted to do it. Certainly not anytime soon. Would you take a draw, though? If I said to you now, let's take a draw and move on to the next game?
So I'm going to say no, and the reason for that is, like you indicated before, we're probably safe now. I mean, barring some sort of crazy miracle, we probably should be looking to cement top 10. So yeah, if we were 10 points less, if we were in Leeds' position or we were in Forest's position, I would say, yeah, an away point away from home. But if we lose or we win at the moment, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. We've afforded ourselves that flexibility. So, I would say, well, let's go and try and win. If we end up losing because we play more open, sod it. Let's try and see if we can make some actual memories and go and beat some good teams. So politely, no, I want to win, albeit I don't think we will.
No, I love that. I appreciate that. And, it's good. I think you always got your team to try and win a game, of course, and not just set up and draw. Alex, thank you. Let's end then with some end of season predictions. Start with my club, Spurs. Where do you honestly think that they will finish in the league this season? Currently set in 12th place.
Good question. Now, I'm looking at the league and there's 7 points between 4th and 14th. So with a pinch of salt, all it takes is you to get a couple of players back and go on a bit of a run and you could blow us out of the water. So I don't think you'll be 12th. I don't think you can ignore the feeling around the club, and it's hard to really gain momentum and positivity when so many questions are being asked. And a lot of what I get from Spurs is you're not just focusing on the football week in, week out. There's so many other things that are being discussed. So my prediction for you guys is that you will come top 10. I'll probably say 9th for you guys. But depending on who you get back from injury, that could change. But at the moment, I can't just make up the fact that you're playing well. Unfortunately, I think you're gonna have more than some of the teams who are currently 9th or 10th. Like, I'd back you to finish above Everton, for example. I don't think they'll sit there. So over the course of the season, you'll creep up, but maybe 9th.
Thank you, Alex. It'll be interesting to see if Thomas Frank's in the job for next season, if that happens, or if he makes it to the end of the year. We'll have to see. Time will tell on that one. Where do you think Sunderland will finish then in the Premier League? Will it be above 9th?
I was watching that pitch side YouTube panel show that some of the Arsenal fans, and there's a West Brom fan, and they all had us down as 7th place finish. And I think one person even had us like 5th or 6th, and it was blowing my mind to read that. I'm not so positive. I'll be honest. I think it'll spur on one thing. When we get the players back from AFCON, if we are safe at that point and we decide that we're going to stop playing defensively and start basically taking the game to teams, knowing that we're up, we could potentially stay in the European mix, like the Conference League, by the way, nothing above that. But right now, we play too defensive. We don't win enough games. And I think over the course of the season, take Spurs, for example. You might lose one game, but then you might win the next one. We're drawing a lot. And over the course of the season, you'll gradually get those 3 points where we're getting 1. And I think that probably will happen, even in the case of Newcastle, for example, although it pains me to say it. So I'm going to say that we'll come 10th and we'll just creep into that top 10, which will be an unbelievable season. And also thinking a bit selfishly as well, you see all those teams get Conference League before they're really at that point as a club. Now, to be honest with you, what I'd hate to see is next season us playing bloody Bate Borisov and CSK Moscow on a Thursday and end up being 16th next season like Forest because we don't have the squad to do it. So my heart says I'd love to maybe get like Real Betis on an away day, but part of me also says, look, come 10th this season, solidify the squad, 3 or 4 more players in, and then go for 7th or 8th next season. But that's a crazy conversation to be having anyways. We're newly promoted, but it could happen. So yeah, I'll settle on 10 for this season.
Will that be above or below Newcastle?
So I watch, as somebody who lives in Newcastle, I have lots of Newcastle supporting friends, and they think they're crap. And I watch probably half of their games, and they're not very good. Away from home, like, they're not very good. So at home, they're decent enough, but the underlying performances for them aren't very good. So I think the Sunderland fan in me says, "Oh well, they probably will finish above us. They've spent more." But actually, watching their games, there's nothing to indicate that. So I'm going to say no, defiantly no. Newcastle are going to come 12th. We're going to come 10th, and I'm going to be very smug. Although I'm sure that I'll get clipped by some Geordie who's listening, and then at the end of the season, I'll look very, very sheepish as we've come 12th and they've come 5th or something. But
I can't see it. I'll be honest with you, I can't see it, and I hope for your case that isn't the case at all. But Alex, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Where can people follow you on social media? Again, remind people where they can find the podcast and a little bit about the podcast as well.
Yeah, so on Twitter, we are What the Folk Podcast. On YouTube, it's rebranded actually to the WTF Podcast now. So yeah, check us out on both. I mean, if you're a Spurs fan who loves Sunderland content, then fill your boots because there's loads of it. But yeah, no, it's mainly those two, obviously on Spotify as well. You can find the WTF Podcast, of which there's previews. There's probably about 3 or 4 discussions a week. So yeah, find us on there.
Alex, thank you very much. Real pleasure to talk to you today. I really appreciate it. And all the best as well for the rest of the season. Thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. For listening by audio podcast platform, drop us a follow and a 5-star review. And I do apologise, Alex, but I'm going to say this. Come on, you Spurs. You came along just like a song.